Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba, back once again, the progenitor of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. If you're watching, make sure you hit the subscribe and the like button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. We're back. We're going to have a great conversation. You said, oh no, why? Oh no, sister. Tell me why you're saying, oh no. We're going to have a great conversation regarding the great debate between one Booker T. Washington, Booker Telefario Washington, and W.E.B Du Bois, William Edward Bohart Du Bois. As many of us know, this is one of the greatest debates in the African American community. Booker T. Washington and, of course, W.E.B Du Bois. Their messages couldn't have been more diverse, right? Their philosophical rivalry between Du Bois and Washington has deep historical roots. To be on the same side, fighting for the same purpose, progress and the uplifting of the Black race, these two Black intellectuals harbored radically divergent views on how to assist African Americans to free themselves from their often subhuman conditions. Both of them wrote had seminal publications within 2 years of each other. Washington's 1901, Up from Slavery, and Du Bois's 1903, The Souls of Black Folk were immediately hailed as classic commentary due to their efforts to address the so-called Negro problem in America. There were a number of Black Americans who made a valiant effort to mitigate poverty, illiteracy, racial discrimination, high mortality rates, and other desolate conditions that plagued many African Americans, particularly at the turn of the century. However, due to their influential appeal among certain constituencies, both Washington and Du Bois garnered ample attention from many segments of American intelligence, many of which were European and ethnic origin. Thus, acknowledgment from the white power structure provided both men a platform to promote their messages. The link is in the description, so if you want to chime in, the link is in the description. So you're going to live stream while they're trying to watch some real football, Roll Tide. You got jokes now, sister. Well, listen, you all are in Knoxville. Good luck coming out of those smoking mountains with a dub, right? The other issue is, and I get it, I know football is a major issue, but I think first off, Ohio State isn't playing, so I'm broadcasting on a Saturday afternoon. But second, I think this is an important conversation for us to have, particularly with the midterm elections coming up in about 3 weeks. So very interesting topic, looking forward to it. So with that being said, the link is in the description, but I'm going to put the link in the chat as well, and we're going to have a great conversation. First and foremost, let me go over the ground rules. As you all know, facts over feelings. Number one, no racial epithets of any kind can be used to describe Black people in any way, shape, or form, irrespective of one's geographical place of origin or present location. I don't play that on my show. If you use terms that are racially disempowering, if you use racial epithets against any Black person of any kind for any reason, I will block you immediately. We don't play that here. Here at Lumumba Speaks, this is a Black empowerment initiative where we believe in empowering Black people throughout the world, but always betting on Black. Number three, no information of any kind can be disseminated on my channel. So what does that mean? What I mean by that is if you're making a claim that is patently false, I will shut you down. Now, that doesn't mean you can't disagree with me, right? I have no problem with someone disagreeing. I don't have a problem with someone having a different philosophical view of the world than me. But if you make a claim that is patently false, there will be a problem. I will shut you down. And I'm going to give you all an example. And I'm going to use a colorful example that oftentimes is used in contemporary sports talk, right? The great debate between Michael Jordan and LeBron James, who's the better player. I wouldn't care if you thought LeBron James is the better basketball player, even though I think it's Michael Jordan. You could come on my channel and we could have the conversation. But if you made the claim that LeBron James is the better player because Michael Jordan only won 2 championships, I would shut you down because that is what patently false. And as I believe, if the basis is wrong, then all that comes from that is wrong as well. It's going to be problematic. Also wanted to go over some Black history facts for today. On this day, 29 years ago, Nelson Mandela, and we know we can't mention Nelson Mandela without mentioning Winnie Mandela, our Shea Black Power. So Nelson Mandela, who was then the president of the African National ANC, was awarded or received the Nobel Peace Prize for his efforts, along with F.W. de Klerk, who was then president in South Africa, to facilitate the dismantling of apartheid, and the development of a multiracial democratic nation in South Africa. I know many people took umbrage with Nelson Mandela standing and receiving the Nobel Peace Prize with what many people considered his enemy. I would consider F.W. de Klerk an enemy as well. We do know it's been nearly 30 years since that took place, and very little progress, many people would argue, has been made. The second Black history fact for today, and it's a rather somber one, that on this day, 35 years ago, in the capital of Burkina Faso, the land of the white people, in the capital Ouagadougou, Thomas Isidore Noel Sankara. But yeah, we are going to have a conversation on Nelson Mandela, traitor or hero. Absolutely, butter Bronner. And you cooking with fish grease, brother. In fact, I'm going to write that down right now. Nelson Mandela, traitor or hero. Thank you very much, brother. We're going to have that conversation coming up. So the second Black history fact is that 35 years ago today, Africa's Che Guevara, as many people called him, Thomas Isidore Noel Sankara, was assassinated due to a French-backed coup. Thomas Sankara was a pivotal figure in the African Pan-Africanist movement. He was known for advocating, of course, healthcare in Burkina Faso, self-reliance, the development of agriculture, education, literacy, women's rights, and of course, most importantly, Pan-Africanism. Thomas Sankara is my son's favorite Pan-Africanist, and of course, he was known for when he came. But Baquan, what's going on, brother? Thomas Sankara was known that when he came to America in 1984, you can fact check me on this if you don't believe me. He was denied an official state visit by the Reagan administration. I would call it the Reagan regime, and as a result, he went to New York City. He was going to speak at the United Nations, and he went to Harlem. He went to the Harriet Tubman Elementary School. And in front of the crowd of mostly African Americans, he stated that for the African revolutionary, my White House is in Black Harlem. And I actually have a video of that speech on my channel. If you want to go on my channel, look at the videos and check that out. And then the next day, because many people would argue that we just talk Black amongst each other, the next day he went to the United Nations and gave the same speech where he reaffirmed that the fight in Africa against neocolonialism was the same fight, was synonymous with the fight that African Americans were having in America against, of course, anti-Blackness, against new Jim Crowism, against the crack cocaine epidemic, so on and so forth. So just want to give those Black history facts. We all know the ground rules. So once again, I'm going to put the link in the chat, and I want you all to tap in. We're going to have a great conversation regarding the great debate between Booker T. Washington and, of course, W.E.B. Du Bois. As many of us know, Booker T. Washington came to prominence as the principal of Tuskegee Institute, which is now Tuskegee University. And then we also know that he was also known for his speech in 1895 in Atlanta, known as at the Cotton States Exposition, that was known as the Atlanta Compromise, in which he urged Black Southerners not to study the liberal arts or demand civil rights or vote, but instead to pursue agriculture, domestic service, manual trades, and business. Increasing Black wealth, he said, would ultimately gain the race the respect of Southern whites. So definitely want to have a conversation about this. We know there were also two prominent Black educators that disagreed with Washington, of course, with W.E.B. Du Bois and John Hope, that believed that Black people, Black Americans, African Americans, just like all Americans, had the right to study liberal arts and high philosophy, to say less. So with that being said, the link is in the chat. I want to have a great conversation about this. We also are going to connect this to the contemporary issues we're facing today, particularly with the struggle for the Black vote between the Democrat and Republican Party. So tap in. The link is in the chat, and we're going to have a great conversation regarding the great debate between two titans in African American history, Booker T. Washington, who wrote Up From Slavery. I actually have a copy back here in my bookshelf, and of course W.E.B. Du Bois. I have numerous, have a couple books, but Du Bois I have, of course, Souls of Black Folks. I have Black Philadelphia, as many people may be unaware, was his PhD dissertation that was published in 1899. And I also have a 2-volume text autobiography on Du Bois. So, and one of the things that I think that is right here, and I think one of the things that are rather interesting about both Washington and Du Bois is that both of them came from mixed racial ancestors. So we know Booker T. Washington's father was white. Booker T. Washington was a mulatto, but of course he identified himself wholly and completely as a Black man. Then we look at W.E.B Du Bois, his mother was a Black woman of a Ghanaian extract, but his father was a Haitian Creole. So both of them, of course, were of mixed racial ancestry. So that is something that we may be able to tap into and have a conversation about as well. But before we get started, once again, the link is in the chat, as well as the description. And so we're going to tap in and have a great conversation. But I also want to read a poem, and I will share it with you all as well. I'm going to share this poem with you all that was written by Dudley Randall. This was a brother out of Detroit. Shout out to the D, the 313 in the house. And he was part of the Black arts movement. Many people may be unaware, but the Black arts movement was a movement by Black artists that was inspired by, of course, Malcolm X. So he wrote a poem many years ago entitled Washington, Booker T, and W.E.B. And it goes a little something like this. It seems to me, said Booker T, it shows a mighty lot of cheek to study chemistry in Greek. When Mr. Charlie needs a hand to hold a cotton on his land, and when Miss Ann looks for a cook, why stick your nose inside a book? I don't agree, said W.E.B. If I should have the drive to seek knowledge of chemistry or Greek, I'll do it. Charles and Miss can look another place for a hand or a cook. Some men rejoice in skill of hand, some in cultivating land, but there are others who maintain the right to cultivate the brain. It seems to me, Booker T, that all your folks have missed the boat, who shout about the right to vote and spend vain days and sleepless nights and uproar over civil rights. Just keep your mouth shut, do not grouse, but work and save and buy a house. I don't agree, said W.E.B., for what can property avail if dignity and justice fail? Unless you help make the laws, there's still your house with trumped up claws. A rope's as tight, a fire as hot. No matter how much cash you've got, speak soft and try your little plan, but as for me, I'll be a man. It seems to me, said Booker T, I don't agree, said W.E.B. So once again, this was a poem entitled Booker T and W.E.B. by Dudley Randall. He's transitioned. He was, of course, a Black poet. He also was the founder of the Black publishing company, Broadside Press Publishing out of Detroit. So that was a poem that he wrote to encapsulate the philosophical debate between one, of course, Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. So tap in, brothers and sisters. The link is in the chat. Hit the thumbs up button. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. We want to have a great philosophical conversation regarding Booker T. Washington and one W.E.B. Du Bois. Was Washington right? Was Du Bois right? I will give you all my perspective once you tap in and we have a conversation. But I think this is a great conversation to have because I think this is something that is still percolating today in the African American community, particularly in the political divide that we see between the Democratic left and the Republican right. So tap in, tap in, tap in. We want to have a great conversation regarding the great debate between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. I tried to get my daughter to join in, but she was like, you know what? I'm going to finish this book I'm reading about Betty Shabazz. So I said, no doubt. But tap in, be part of the conversation. I know some people may be watching football, right? But that's quite all right. I think we can multitask. We could chew gum and walk at the same time. So I think you could watch the game, have it on mute, and be part of a great intellectual conversation. Because one of the things I think we need to do in our community, of course, is promote critical thinking. I know we need to build strong institutions. We need to actually promote, practice, and control industry as well. But I think we could be multifaceted in our approach to Black empowerment. So we got a brother named Booker T. Jr. tapping in. So What say you, brother Booker T. Jr.? And I'm presuming that that's a pseudonym, by the way.
Yeah, it's me, Ghost, from the chat.
All right, no doubt, no doubt.
Yeah, nah. So thank you for having me on and everything. But yeah, so I'm not as familiar with W.E.B as I am with Booker T. Just
Okay.
to preface it, I have The Future of the American Negro by Booker T. Washington in audiobook on my phone. I believe I've listened to that in full maybe twice. And I think I read Up from Slavery possibly, but I can't find that for sure. But so that's what I've read as far as actual books. W.E.B, like I said, not as familiar with him, but from what I've seen from some of your videos and looked up online, I think I have an idea of kind of what he was looking to do. And you can correct me if I'm wrong on anything, but I mean, I think that I'm in more favor of Booker T, and the reason is because I think what people get wrong is that, from my perspective, it's like he was speaking on things based on the time that he was in. So for people that maybe don't know as much about it or whatever, essentially he's coming from a position where he's like, I believe he was um, either first generation or just coming out of slavery, right? When he was picked up by this guy who was ran a school or a university or something.
Hampton Institute.
Right. Yeah. So he was picked up by this guy, white guy. He was essentially educated, and I'm gonna go through the short version of it, but he was essentially educated by the guy, and that's kind of how he ended up advancing on to different positions and eventually becoming, as you said, the president of the university, right? But his perspective was essentially, and again, correct me if you think I'm wrong on anything here, but he's essentially saying develop skills, come to my school, educate yourself if you want on anything, even if it is some sort of more, I guess you could say, intellectual or whatever pursuit, but mainly develop skills, make the Negro useful and employable, or at least able to provide for themselves, before getting into politics and just kind of pursuing strictly academic or intellectual pursuits. Maybe. Would you agree with that? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I think there's a caveat that you're leaving out, but for most people,
Okay.
the only thing. So yes, his focus on economic development. Let's make ourselves economically independent. The caveat was, and this is oftentimes what I believe many people miss the boat regarding Washington, is his focus was on keeping Black people alive. So most people may be unaware, but Rayford Logan, the Pan-African historian who, of course, wrote the book, seminal book, Betrayal of the Negro, from Rutherford B. Hayes to Woodrow Wilson. I actually have it behind me here. He talks about how during the period of the First Nadir, all rights were stripped of Black people, and we literally were being killed like it was going out of style. Like literally, we're talking about white vigilantism on steroids. So Booker T. Washington saw this and said, listen, I'm trying to build this institution. What can I say to keep white folk from killing us? And so that was one of the reasons why he promoted the message that he did. So I'm gonna give an example because there's a stream of literature, scholarly literature, that argues that Booker T. Washington actually was a Black nationalist, and I'll tell you why. So we know that part of Black nationalism is the concept of economic independence, right? And this is something that we also find with Black conservatives as well. But I give an example. There was a situation where there was a brother who was accused of a crime. He ran onto the campus of Tuskegee and ran to Booker T. Washington and said, can you hide me on campus? Booker T. Washington was like, hell no, I'm turning your ass in. Now, most people say, well, how could he turn the brother in? He's a sellout, so on and so forth, so on and so forth. He knew, Booker T. Washington knew if he protected the brother and harbored him on campus, that what? The white folk would have came and burned the campus down. So he went and turned him in, paid his bond, and then put him on a train to New York City. So the issues, his behavior was nuanced, right? He did a lot of compromising in public, but a lot of nationalist building in private. There were numerous initiatives that he actually financed, fighting for Black people's civil rights. But publicly, he was like, oh, don't worry about that. But his goal was trying to keep Black people alive.
Exactly. Yeah. Now that's a good point. And thank you for saying that. And yes, I was aware of that. He does actually definitely touch on that in the future of the American Negro, for one. I
Mhm.
know for a fact. So yeah, no, I agree. I think there's a lot of things. It's not just a discussion. It's a multi-part discussion basically. I mean, they have political views that you could discuss for hours. Then you have the sort of economic, like you said, the economic development differences between the way that they view things. So there's a couple different things there that
Mhm.
they had differing views on. But yeah, I mean, I like the way you kind of summarize it though, because that's the way that I see it. Essentially, here's the way I would say to contextualize it for like a modern view. And again, correct me if you think I'm wrong or anything, but I think to me, Booker T. Washington is like sort of like a conservative of today, at least in terms of the way that they claim to present themselves or say what they're about, basically in terms of like. Now I get obviously the time things and what he's trying to do is a little bit different because we don't have the KKK like actively
So let
trying
me
to be.
say this. I would disagree with the fact that Booker T. Washington is a conservative of today. And the reason why is because, and I'm actually going to pull out this book. It's a great book, and I'm actually going to push everyone to read it. Um, so this book right here is entitled "Saviors or Sellouts: The Promise and Pearl of Black Conservatism from Booker T. Washington to Condoleezza Rice." Great book here, "Saviors or Sellouts." Okay, and in the book, they talk about how historically there has always been two types of black conservatives in the black community. You have organic black conservatives who develop a conservative view and political philosophy based on their own lives and experiences. And then we have what are known as inorganic black conservatives. And these are individuals that develop a conservative mantra based on what being trained and paid by white conservative think tanks. And so typically today, what you find are black conservatives who are being paid and financed, subsidized, trained to what? Spew not only white conservative talking points, but also anti-black rhetoric due to the fact that they are oftentimes on the payrolls of white conservative think tanks. So there's a difference between being an organic black conservative and an inorganic black conservative.
Okay, sure, and I totally agree with that. But would you say that at least some of his values, as far as kind of developing more blue collar skills and things like that, would you say that that at least aligns with the possibly inorganic conservative values of today, whether it's legitimate or not?
No, and I'm gonna tell you
No.
why. One, because when you listen to black conservatives, one of their talking points isn't black people to do anything for themselves. It's all about trying to ingratiate ourselves with white folk. The other issue is the fact that we live in a day and age now to where typically no American wants to do manual labor. We save that for the immigrants, right? Right? I'm not about to sit up here and what's the word I want to use? Tear down somebody's roof, right? I'm not about to be a gardener, right? I don't do manual labor. The only time I lift something is when I go to the gym, right? So there's a bit of a difference there. But I think the major issue is that today's inorganic black conservatives, they identified with themselves as just solely being an American. Booker T. Washington still viewed himself as a black man who happened to be American. So he wasn't confused about who he was, as we see with many. And Booker T. Washington wasn't someone that downplayed the importance of race. We know that he used extremely conciliatory language when speaking publicly, but he never wanted to dismiss the fact that he was black or say I'm going to be with a non-black person, particularly a white person, because I'm going to be bettering my family by marrying white. He wasn't gone like most inorganic black conservatives are today.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not asserting any of that. I
Mhm.
mean, I understand all that and I agree with that. I would say, to kind of push back on one thing you said there. I mean, whether I'm not sure, if you're seeing it or not, but there is I would say, I'm not sure it's hard to quantify how many people are saying it, but there is a conversation for Black people to kind of go away from higher education and focus more on developing traditional skills. And that is something that some of the definitely inorganic Black conservatives or various conservatives are, preaching a little bit now.
I would say I think a lot of people are saying that irrespective of what their political philosophy is, but a lot of that is rooted in what? The fact that higher education has become so expensive, it's become extremely expensive.
Sure.
Yes, Saviors of Sellouts. That's right, Sister Jones. The Promise and Pearl of Black Conservatism from Booker T. Washington to Condoleezza Rice. Great book. Like I said, I've read it. Actually, I'm going to be doing a actual. Let me see here. I'm going to be doing a show on the importance of Black political ideologies, and so we're going to cover Black conservatism, and I definitely want you all to be part of that conversation because I'm going to be doing that one on the 22nd. In fact, I might even bump it up. I might bump it up to the 16th, so we could, since we got a good mojo going. So yes, but The Promise and Pearl, Black Conservatives from Booker T. Washington, Condoleezza Rice. There's also another one I think you all may want to check out, and that is entitled Rediscovering Black Conservatism. This is a good book as well by Lee H. Walker. So if you haven't, please check these two books out. Rediscovering Black Conservatism by Lee H. Walker. So many people may even ask the question, well, Bakari, Brother Lumumba, you are a Pan-Africanist. You believe in, Black power. Why would you be looking to share and disseminate information regarding Black conservatism? I think that's a great question, right? And the reason why is I believe in giving people a holistic picture of a situation. I want to give you all of the information and then you're able to make a decision. I think oftentimes when we're dealing with individuals who want to be thought leaders, who are influencers, so on and so forth, what we tend to find is they only give you one perspective of a situation. And I believe that that's intellectually disingenuous because I believe when someone is lying by omission, that means that they're interested not only in controlling how you think, but also subsequently your behavior as well. So I don't look to do that. I'm not interested in controlling anyone in any way, shape, or form. My goal is to disseminate information, a holistic information, and then allow my viewers to make a decision on their own based on the facts, right? Not based on conjecture, not based on innuendo, not based on my personal perspective, but based on the facts. And of course, having a background as an educator, this is how I've been trained. This is how I like to present information to the masses as well. So with that being said, the link is in the chat. We got Brother Booker T. Jr. on the line, but we definitely want to get some more people to tap in and be part of the conversation. We're having a conversation about the great debate that we know took place at the turn of the 20th century between one Booker T. Washington and, of course, W.E.B. Du Bois. And because this is going so well, we have a lot of viewers. I think I may even have another great debate series regarding the conversation or debate between one W.E.B. Du Bois and, of course, Marcus Garvey. And then, of course, the third one could be the debate between Marcus Garvey and one A. Philip Randolph, right? And maybe even the fourth one could be the debate between one of Marcus Garvey and Haile Selassie. So, I mean, we can just keep this going all day, right? But with that being said, the link is in the chat. I'm going to put the link in the chat one more time. That's 100% important. Learning the whole story is very important. Appreciate you, Brother Malcolm. Hope you can tap in and be part of the conversation. As Brother Malcolm know, we're good friends. Shout out to the DYT, the 937 West Dayton Strong. As you know, having a background as an educator, I truly believe in a holistic perspective, right? Rather than just getting one side of the story, I do believe that does a disservice oftentimes in our quest for, of course, African redemption at home and abroad. So I'm going to put the link. Marcus Garvey versus everybody, no doubt. Okay, you know what? I'll pull that one up. We could do that. We could do Marcus Garvey versus everybody. The link is in the chat. Come on, be part of the conversation. Booker T. Washington Jr. Quick question for you, Booker T. What did the T in Booker T. Washington? The T was Booker T. Washington's middle initial. What was his middle name?
Taliaferro.
Ashe, Black Power, absolutely. So with that being said, what say you moving forward? Do you believe that there is some merit to W.E.B. Du Bois's position, particularly the fact that you could gain wealth, buy a home, but if you don't make the laws, it won't mean anything at all?
Yes, definitely. and that's what I was kind of, we kind of went off on some different subjects, but yeah, what I was saying is that Booker T's perspective was a, a lot. It had a lot to do with his current position and his view of Black people's position at that time. Now, this is a different time. This is 2022. So, yeah, it's a lot more relevant now, I would say, than it was then. Not to necessarily say, I wouldn't say I wholeheartedly agree with Booker T on that perspective. I think it's a nuanced discussion, and they're smarter than me, and you're more well educated on this stuff. So any of you guys might have perspectives that I might agree with. I don't consider myself to necessarily be maybe as educated out as I would need to be to say for sure. But what I would say is right now, for sure, it's definitely more relevant. Like, we have advanced at least to the point where we definitely would need to be in positions of political power to do anything. Now, look, I mean, like people put in the chat, Marcus Garvey versus everybody, I'm of the belief that we are not going to control anything here anytime soon. And I'm not convinced that we've ever been in control of very much here. So I'm not too optimistic about that, but that's just my perspective. But yeah, if we were to try to do it.
So I'm gonna ask you a question. With that being said, because the brother said Marcus Garvey versus everybody, and I just wrote that down. So, so would you say that because of that your belief is that we should dipset like Marcus Garvey taught us to do? We need to get the HE hockey sticks out of here. Is that what you're saying?
Brr, what happened to that boy? Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, look, now is it realistic to say we should do it?
Shout out to Turn of the 21st Century Hip Hop, right?
Right. Yeah. Now, is it realistic to say that we can all do it? No. So I'm not saying that like what you're doing with this platform and stuff is useless. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that at all. But in the end, yes, we would need to be in a position to really control, not just work on being able to control, which is essentially what I would say, not to be too reductive, but unfortunately, I mean, that is just my opinion.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So let me ask you this question. Du Bois pushed the idea, the concept of liberal arts, right? So that we could build institutions, create institutions, be able to compete with everyone on a equal playing field, right? So many argued, particularly white supremacists, that Black people needed little education, and we do know, and I actually have a great book on the history of Black education in the South, that part of the reason for that was it was allow them to control us. I think if you read W.E.B Du Bois's book, Souls of Black Folk, particularly, I think it's chapter 9, The Coming Home of John. It talks about Black education in the South and how the white supremacists, the white nationalists, or even damn near all white folk, the goal was to keep us from becoming highly educated so that we could be easy to control. We know as well that typically when you're smarter than someone, it's easy to manipulate them. So do you think there needs to be a duality or a marriage or a blending of Booker T. Washington's and W.E.B. Du Bois's messages and philosophy?
Absolutely, yeah. In 2022, to try to not give you a long-winded answer. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, there should be. I would say I lean, based on my understanding of the perspectives, I still lean a little bit more towards, or maybe a lot towards, Booker T, because I actually think that a lot of what he was doing and saying, unfortunately, is still relevant. Now, as I understand it, a lot of his plan was to do certain things so that it wouldn't be relevant in 2022. But unfortunately, we know the history, and I'll let you, speak more on that. But, right. That didn't turn out to be the case. In my opinion, we are, I wouldn't say completely full circle. Like I said, some things W.E.B. has said are true now, more truer maybe than what they were in the past, in my opinion. But we are still very in a similar position to where we were when Booker T was looking at it. That's the way I see it.
Got you. And we do know that here in America, and I would dare say even throughout the world, whenever there has been real or even perceived racial progress by African people, has always been followed by a period of racial retrenchment. And I'll give some examples of that. We know that after the Civil War, there was the Reconstruction era. And as a result of the Reconstruction era, it was followed by what? The nadir of race relations. We know that after the Civil Rights Black Power movement, it was followed by law and order and deindustrialization of America's inner cities. And then we know after the historic election of one Barack Obama, it was followed by a period of white vigilantism that rivaled the first nadir of race relations, right? So, and we saw the rise in white nationalist hate groups, right? WNHG, white nationalist hate groups. So we do know that, unfortunately, in America, and I dare say throughout the world, that whenever African people have had real or even perceived progress, it's been followed by a period of racial retrenchment. With that being said, I do think there needs to be a marrying of both political philosophies. One that does promote industrialism, right? The ability to be economically independent, not have to depend on the whims of the dominant society, right? This is something that we see in oftentimes in Jewish communities and also with Arab American communities. But also, I think there is an importance for us to actually be highly educated, allow ourselves to be in a position where we're able to think critically and not allow ourselves to be manipulated by the powers that be. So I personally believe in the marrying of the perspectives. I'm not one, I like to look at situations objectively. And I think that the reality of the situation is that every situation that we are in tends to be extremely nuanced in nature. We need a culture again. We need a reading culture again. Many of the ancestors were autodidactic. Yes, they were. Absolutely. Autodidactic. My daughter just learned that word yesterday, Brother Buana. We were sitting down eating dinner, and I had her doing a little reading. And she said, "What is this word? Autodidactic." And well, what does this mean? And I said, "Okay, well, let's get it. I need you to look it up." So another topic, Trevor Prime says, can you be American and Pan-African? That is a great question. We're going to have that. Matter of fact, that would tie in, and I would argue no, because oftentimes America's policy, particularly internationally, foreign policy, is rooted in what? Harming the global South. Right? So that's a great conversation. Can you be an American and Pan-African? As a Pan-African myself, I do not identify myself as an American. I identify myself, of course, as a member of Africa's displaced progeny, right? One of the sons and daughters of Africa. So great question. But hey, tap in, be part of the conversation. We're having a conversation about the great debate, the turn of the 20th century debate between two Black intellectuals, two Black giants of African American history. One, W.E.B Du Bois, and the other, of course, Booker T. Washington. One was the creator, of course, of Tuskegee Institute, which is now Tuskegee University, and the other, of course, was W.E.B Du Bois, who was one of the greatest sociologists that ever lived. He was the first African American to receive a PhD from Harvard University. He received his PhD in sociology, and he was known for his robust writing. Of course, we know his doctoral dissertation, The Philadelphia Negro, was published in 1899, Souls of Black Folk in 1903. And he, of course, initially moved to, of course, Ghana at the behest of one Kwame Nkrumah due to his lack of faith in American race relations. Where he moved to Ghana, he began to work on an Encyclopedia Africana, which, of course, was a Pan-African project to, of course, chronicle the contributions that African people have made not only to humanity, but human civilization as well. So with that being said, the link is in the chat. Come on, be part of the conversation. If you don't want to be part of the conversation, you can, of course, drop a message in the comments. But once again, we're having a conversation regarding W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. Once again, one of the things I think is rather interesting about both, of course, Washington and Du Bois is that they gained such a national platform due to what the backing of course, whites, right? So they became who they were in part, not only because they were brilliant, but also because of white largesse. So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, that's a good point to point out for those who did not know. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I would say partially, even respectfully, regardless of what either one of them would even say about that, I mean, it's also partially a sign of the times. You know, the guy discovering Booker T. Washington and sending him off to school and sort of mentoring him. You know, who else was going to do it? Most likely. I mean, I'm not saying that there's no other Black scholars that could have, you know, found him, but you know, it's a sign of the times. Like mostly white people would have been in control and in positions of education in order to find him and put him in that position. So it's unlikely that he would have been able to be mentored by, you know, a Black scholar of sorts. And then W.E.B. Du Bois, you know, despite the fact that he did eventually get to where he got, you know, as you know, I'm sure it was not just a simple, easy journey for him to get to the PhD level. You know, obviously he had to go through certain things. And then when he got to, so after he completed some of his schooling, as the story, as I understand it, he then had to go back and basically redo some of his schooling at a white institutions in order for them to accept the credits and things that he had already achieved previously. He had to go back and do that stuff in order for him to get into Harvard and get his PhD. Now, like I said, correct me if I'm wrong on any of that, but that's my understanding. So he had to go through all of that and, you know, deal with whoever different Caucasian people were, you know, the decision makers basically. So yeah, I mean, it's a process, and we're still dealing with a lot of that stuff today. I would even say a lot of us are probably still dealing with similar situations like that if we're advancing anywhere in society, even if you're doing a blue collar job, because most of
Right.
those apprenticeships are going to be managed by somebody who is not Black in most cases.
Absolutely. 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 I think that's a good, you could go right ahead.
Yeah, no, so that's what I think about that. But just moving on, you know, I don't know exactly what particular, if you had any particular things you were looking to discuss, but I just want to tap back in on some of the political thing because, in political and education sort of thing, because well, I think a lot of their points on both sides are still relevant today. What I would say about that is like, so first of all, you know, I am educated. I was actually, you know, I went to school on an academic scholarship, which is unusual for, you know, Black men in my area at least. And coming from, I didn't come from like wealth or anything like that. Actually, neither of my parents probably had any hope of going to college, and they definitely didn't go to college. So you know, so I say all that just to say, not to brag or anything like that, but my point is just I am educated to a degree, and I do have a degree, and I, you know, I do have some education. So it's not like I'm not one of these. I think a lot of people saying this argument are a little bit disingenuous. They're kind of bitter about this and that. I think that what's best for you is what's best for you. I mean, if you are not going to succeed academically, then I'm not encouraging you to go to college, you know, because as a successful academic student, highly successful, you might say in some cases, like, you know, I know that what's the point? Like you're spending a lot of money to do something that you're not going to succeed at. It's like me saying that I'm gonna try out for the NBA. And if I'm not, you know, 6'8" or whatever, it's like it's I don't really understand the point. But you know, to each their own. But like I said, yeah, I do think that it's a nuanced discussion. You have to consider whether it's right for you financially, whatever the case may be. I do think there's a lot of merit, though, like I said, to, and I'm sorry if I'm kind of rambling, but here's the thing, like, again, it all comes down to an individual basis. Like what Booker T was saying, and you mentioned this a little bit, like some of the things he was saying and doing, he was saying one thing outwardly and doing another thing behind the scenes. At least that's what he claimed, and I happen to agree with it. So we cannot always do everything out front. We can't always be telling, you know, the enemy our moves or whatever. You have to do some things a certain way, and that is what Booker T said he was doing in some of his books and papers and things, and that's what it seemed to me like he was doing. Now, who knows? He could be a fraud. Honestly, I don't know. I'm not saying that I know. I wasn't alive in 1899, but I'm just saying based on what I can see and what I've read it seems like that's the way he was doing things. And even W.E.B. Du Bois had to do things like that because, like I said, they couldn't do everything out front. And I just think that as that relates to tie that back in, like economically, sometimes we're still in a position where it might be better for us to just kind of do something that allows us to survive and make money, and then kind of do like how the other immigrants do, right? Like, you know, you don't see first generation Asian people always come over here and they're not the doctor sometimes. They're selling Chinese food. Their kids they send to school to become the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, so I think that is just relevant. And as far as the political angle, I mean, I think things have changed to a degree. I think we should try to be involved. We should try to do as much as we can to direct and guide our direction as a people. But what I would say is that at the end of the day, I don't believe that we will be allowed to control anything, because one thing we have to remember, and this is just a very simple thing that you can try to debate, but it seems very simple and clear to me. I mean, look, people came over here and established these colonies as offshoots of British colonies, and they established them with a purpose. Now, most of these people, contrary to what anyone may say, I'm very well read on this history for sure, and most of these people were not just bums. They were not just back end hillbillies. A lot of these people were successful like landowners and things in Britain. So I say that to say that they came over here with a plan. They executed the plan. The plan is to control this country and keep it under their control for a long time. So if you want to go up against that, you know, you think you're going to be able to do that with just a couple black lawyers or educated people, I mean, you know, you can do that. But I don't think that that's going to be successful. So that's why I think the Pan-Africanism strategy would be better. I mean, now don't get me wrong. We can't just completely lay down and not be involved in anything. But I don't think that we can successfully, like, you know, steer things in another. And there's other things I could say as far as why I don't think that's a successful strategy, but I don't want to hijack the show.
No problem. No problem. So you said you don't think you can make it to the NBA. How tall are you, brother?
5'8".
Okay.
Best.
Okay. Ditto. Okay. Got you. Brother asked the question: do you think Du Bois was an integrationist? Hey, brother, you know you allow me on your channel. Tap in, be part of mine. But I would say that at this point in his life, at the turn of the 20th century, he was an integrationist, particularly because he was involved in the NAACP. Of course, we know he created the literary organ of the NAACP that still exists to this day. That's Crisis Magazine. But at this time, he was, of course, an integrationist, but he, of course, ended up turning towards Black nationalism and Pan-Africanism later in life. But Bawana says, good for you, brother. Just remember to take two notes, the one the school curriculum gives you and the one you educate yourself with. And I think that's a good point. I always tell people when you're taking a class, you have to take the class, of course, to pass, but you also need to take the class and look at what can I glean from this course? What information can I take from this that is beneficial to me as a Black person? Ashe. And so that's the perspective I take as an educator, particularly when I'm speaking and working with Black students. So good point, Brother Buana. Once again, the link is in the chat. Tap in, be part of the conversation. Even if you aren't as well read or knowledgeable of the book of the Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois debate, at the very least, tap in and just give your perspective on their ideas, right? So we've gone over their ideas, I think, ad nauseum now. So if you could simply share that, that would be great, because we, of course, want to have, a robust discussion regarding, of course, their philosophical differences. But I do think what is also important is to recognize that they did have the same goal, and that was to empower the Black community, just by different means. So I think that it's the same as if you're a boxer. You want to win the fight. Some people win fighting like Floyd Mayweather Jr. Some people win fighting like Mike Tyson, but the goal is to get the dub. So with that being said, tap in. I'm going to put the link in the chat one more time. And we're having a great conversation regarding the great debate. And that is, of course, the philosophical difference between W.E.B. Du Bois and, of course, Booker T. Washington. And I think another issue is that, unfortunately, many individuals that have this conversation or are on opposite sides of the political aisle don't understand that we're supposed to have the same goal, right? And this is what one of the things I'm gonna talk about when I do my my live on the importance of ideology, right? But I think one of the major issues, and I even saw this, unfortunately, when I was in the military, right? Full disclosure, I tell people all the time, I was in, of course, them folks' military, but I learned a lot during that experience. And you'll see people, he's in the Air Force, you're in the Army, he's in the Marines, he's in the Navy, and people are beefing. Dude, we all got the same goal, like stop the dumb shit, right? So I think oftentimes, unfortunately, people aren't able to see beyond their political differences, philosophical differences, and I think that's extremely problematic and a bit disconcerting if the goal, of course, is Black empowerment. I would argue oftentimes that that's not the case. I think I'm seeing a rise in the influx of individuals that are Black conservatives who are masquerading as Black nationalists or Pan-Africanists, trying to invade these spaces. And I shouldn't use the term invade because they're allowed to be whatever they want, but actually masquerading as Black nationalists when they actually are Black conservatives. So I think that's a major issue as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn to a contemporary issue, and that is the midterm elections, right? We know oftentimes Democrats focus on this idea of legislation. And we see oftentimes Black conservatives are focused on what their ability to make money. And I think this, of course, is a 21st century representation of the great debate between, of course, one Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. So my thoughts are, what say you all, of course, who are watching now about that issue? Is this still the same debate taking place 100 plus years later? And if so, what can we do now to actually try to facilitate actual tangible goal moving forward for African people here in America? But Brother Booker T, what do you say?
You said, I'm sorry, you said to facilitate what again? I'm sorry.
Actual tangible goals for African people here in America.
Tangible goals. Okay. And you're saying in regards to what political party we should vote or how we should handle that, or how?
No, just in terms of oftentimes we're still seeing that debate take place now, right? And unfortunately, many people get entrenched in their own political perspectives, right, rather than focusing on what the overall goal is, and that should be Black empowerment. And oftentimes that takes place, in my personal opinion. This doesn't have to be necessarily a fact, but due to people having conversations only within their own echo chambers, right? And so my concern is, how do we solve this problem moving forward?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I mean, first, trying to answer that as succinctly as I can. So first, I would say, first and foremost, everyone, I would encourage everybody to look at the facts as much as possible, educate themselves as much on the issues. But once you've done that, I think that, you may find that, that's why the Pan-African solution to me is the main one. So I think that should probably be the number one focus. But again, I would encourage everybody to look at it themselves and see what they think is the best strategy. Because at the end of the day, everyone does have their own ideas on what they think is best. And not everyone is interested in any sort of relocation, even if it's to the next state, as we know. So that is what that is. But secondly, to answer your question, I would say, that is an area where I would say we have this B1 movement. But I think that I'm not always convinced that people are always really thinking like that. I think one solution and answer to your question is if we actually really thought like that. And what I mean is that specifically, every policy or anything that even you're doing as an individual, even in your family, your friends, whatever, have more intention. Is this going to benefit me, my family?
10 right there. That's a tough open field.
Wanda, you got to turn off the.
I apologize.
Okay, yeah, but anyway, so yeah, whether it's going to benefit you, your family, and Black people moving forward, and by moving forward, I mean like progress of whatever group you're trying to benefit, which presumably, if you're on this panel, is Black people. So
let me speak to that very quickly. So I think part of the issue is when you talk about this whole B1 concept is I've met individuals, of course, in these YouTube streets, right, who have advocated B1, but they are vehemently opposed to Pan-Africanism. And I was like, this is unbelievable because Pan-Africanism is Black first. I mean, come on now, race first. You know, I mean, for example, and I actually remember having a conversation with the brother, and I pulled his book out. You know, Tony Martin, race first. You know, the ideological and organizational struggles of Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And Marcus Garvey is quoted as stating, in a world of wolves, one should go armed, and one of the most powerful defense weapons within the reach of Negroes is the practice of race first in all parts of the world. So I didn't understand how we have individuals promoting the concept and idea of B1, Black first, but then they vehemently opposed to, of course, Pan-Africanism. So I think that, and once again, I think it comes down to they're looking at a situation in which they see themselves as just being American, a Black American, an African American, and there's no concern about Black people throughout the world and how the policies of the American government negatively affects them.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. Now, that's one of those things where I would say that, and I'm not accusing you of doing this, but we have to be careful not to get sidetracked by these little, movements. I shouldn't say little, but you know what I mean. Like, I mean,
yes, sir.
The division, as we know, the strategy of divide and conquer, it's alive and well. It's something that has been used for a long time, and it's still being used. And I just think that where I'm at right now, I just don't even focus on those types of people too much. I may comment here or there or whatever, but for the most part, I mean, if people are being disingenuous, they're placing an allegiance to a religious body, a political body, whatever the case may be, over some sort of Pan-African or Black first strategy, or even if they're presenting to be Pan-African or Black first, but really doing something else clearly. I think that those of us who are educated or our eyes are open enough to see that, I think we should just kind of try not to focus on them too much unless they're addressing us directly. But other than that, I think we should just, let them kind of do their thing and drown out the movement. What I will say is that you can only keep doing things that are not working for so long. Eventually, people are going to start figuring out the game is being run on them. And I do think that, people are definitely starting to pick up on this whole division thing where you have these people that are essentially, in some cases, just directly grifting from the community and doing it for years. And it's starting to be noticeable. Like eventually, if you don't produce tangible results, people are going to start figuring things out. We don't have nobody, with all due respect to everybody, there ain't no Malcolm X's running around here for the most part. So, it's pretty obvious to see when some people are just basically grifting. And that's what I'll say on that.
Okay, you're cooking with fish grease, brother. You're cooking with fish grease. Absolutely. So, you know what? I would agree with you there. I think you're absolutely right. I think you're right about that. I shouldn't be concerned with what I would argue are basically ancillary movements in the first place, right? I think the reality of the situation is that if someone is being disingenuous, they will be found out in due time, or we need to move full steam ahead with what we're looking to do to help empower our people, irrespective of where we are in the world. Brother Bawana, you've been waiting patiently. What say you?
Yeah, you are definitely right, Brother Lumumba. Respect to you, Brother Booker T. You are cooking with fish and grease. I think that it's unfortunate that we are rehashing ideas that we've been discussing for centuries now. And it's what's interesting to me is you have some people out here who are posing as historians, but don't know the political and philosophical discussions that we've been having for 100 years, for instance.
Yes, sir. Teach. Yes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
For instance, even before this particular discussion with Du Bois, you had David Walker and you had Frederick Douglass, and Frederick Douglass was talking about.
Well, yeah, we had Frederick Douglass and Martin Delany.
Martin Delany, sorry, that's yes. I got it right. Martin Delany. So,
Yes, sir.
so Frederick
But,
Douglass.
but the fact that you know who David Walker is, brother, special kudos to you. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right
Yeah,
here, brother. Right
yeah,
here.
I forgot. So the thing is that, you know, if you look into to the philosophical discussions of Frederick Douglass, he sounded like FBA a lot. Yeah, I mean, really, if
Yeah.
you
But yeah,
really,
yeah. Frederick Douglass was an integrationist, and that's what many people
absolutely,
don't know. He was an integrationist.
absolutely, and Mondellini was on some let's do our thing and go back and do our thing. So in this issue of Du Bois, I think Du Bois was along the lines of maybe integrationism, but his where my problem is, where did these great thinkers end the discussion? And Du Bois' discussion ended in Africa. That was his conclusion. We can't do it here. Let's go there. Yeah, I mean, so my thinking is, if we were to take a look at the past and to see where our thought leaders, where the conclusions ended up, many of them said to themselves, "Well, look, this is the case." Even Martin Luther King, I think towards the end of his life, and I'm not saying that Martin Luther King was a Pan-African, but his ideas was, for me, it was along the lines of maybe this whole idea of integrationism was a mistake. maybe we need to take a second look at it. And I think that our great thought leaders of today, our contemporary thought leaders, should do a better job in exposing the realities of, hey, we've been discussing these things a long time ago. And really these discussions ultimately came to a conclusion with our ancestors, our thought leaders of the past. So we should take a page out of that book and move from there, or else we'll continue this continuous loop. And then 30 years from now, after all this FBA militant integrationism thing is phased out, we're gonna go entertain these same kind of discussions
Right.
with another group of shysters 30 and 40 generations ahead of us. And I'm saying that we need to get out of this loop, because I feel like this question of where we are, what should we do, what is that the direction and the course, I feel like that matter has been settled, and I think that we should move from that point. But I don't like the whole idea of being in a loop. I feel like we are in a continuous loop. And the brother says that, Booker T says that he believes that we'll eventually see this for what it is. I question that because you had 100 years ago, they was having discussions like this. Then you had the civil rights movement, they had discussions like this. Then 30 years later, now here we are with these same kinds of discussions. So I query whether we will actually see the bigger picture and move from the conclusions of our former forefathers. I don't know what your brothers think about that.
So I want to say this. Number one, I think one of the issues is, if we are all familiar with COINTELPRO, and we know that during COINTELPRO, there were agents that were used in numerous manners to what? Do harm to Black organizations and Black communities at the behest, of course, of white power. Today, I think we have the same thing, but they're agents of misinformation, right? And so I think that's something that we need to be cognizant of. So, and I'm gonna give an example. I was having a conversation with my ideological mother, Queen Mother Olabisi, from the South Side of Chicago. And we were having a conversation. She said, one of the ways that you know that a person is an agent, and she said, this is something that we saw when she was coming up in the 60s and 70s, is that if someone shows up, and this is an extremely important issue to the Black community, and they show up and they start speaking, and they know very little about the subject matter. But this person is supposed to be what? A preeminent speaker or an invited guest, right? You say, well, what is that about? She says another example would be that the person wouldn't be knowledgeable of the facts, but they would be an agent provocateur. So they would be like, man, this guy gave a great historiographic overview of the situation, but then their solution will be so out of bounds you can't take them serious. Right. So these are some of the things that we find. I also want to mention David Walker's appeal to the colored citizens of the world, particularly the United States of America, was one of the first African-centered critiques of course, white power, white vigilantism, and of course, anti-Black racism. So if you have not read David Walker's appeal to the colored citizens of the world, make sure you pick that up. I've read it. It was one of the first books I read when I started many years ago on my associate's degree, of course, in African American Studies. Also, many people argue that David Walker's appeal was actually written to, of course, white people, because unfortunately at the time there weren't many Black people who were literate. And of course, we do know that he unfortunately died, what many people believe, due to what foul play, as he was found dead in his Boston, Massachusetts apartment. With that being said, Brother Gold says yes, also when they do not admit their lack of knowledge and understanding. So these are some of the major issues. If we don't learn from history, we risk repeating the mistakes of the past. Ashe, ashe, ashe. Brother Bwana, go right ahead.
No, I was done. I wanted Booker T to really I want him to give us an opinion on whether we're able to see the bigger picture, or if we'll continuously going through this cycle, this loop, this generational cycle of really continuing with the same kinds of philosophical arguments that we've been discussing for hundreds of years, or as he suggests, we're going to see the bigger game because of all this information that we have at our fingertips. Because I feel like with the technology that we have, we should be better informed. And it seems as if we are using this technology, this great information, smartphone in our hands, to make us a whole lot dumber. So I don't know. I don't know. That's what, yeah, smartphones are supposed to create smart people. But I think that yeah, I just really wanted to know what his opinions is on that particular issue.
Okay, well, thank you for the question. First of all, like, facts over feelings. The facts. I believe this is facts. I mean, it's somewhat opinion based, but I can probably support it with some facts here. The thing is, look, we have approximately 17% of Black men in America have a college degree. Now, I may be off on that a little bit, but from about 2016 or something, that's a study that I've seen from the blackdemographics.com or something. So whatever it is, it's around that amount, okay?
Hey,
you
and
guys,
shout out to blackdemographics.com.
Right. And you guys, and Professor Lumumba, you obviously way more educated on this stuff than me, but feel free to dispute anything. But as far as we know, it's around there. Okay. We also all know that even if you grew up in a space where, say, let's say you're a HBCU student or a Black Student Union or whatever it is you're doing, all that stuff. The reality is a lot of our people are not in these positions. I personally have I've been on both sides. I've seen everything. I've seen affluent. I grew up around affluent Black people, and I grew up around the least affluent. I've lived in the hood, and I've lived in a Black suburb. And I'm not gonna go too much more into detail about that right now, but let's just say that much, okay? And by the hood, I mean like the hood, not like.
Right. Not the rap hood. You didn't scribble in your notepad and create your life. Like, you went outside and you saw what everybody was so-called rapping about.
Yeah. Now, I lived there for a very short period of time at a young age, but
okay.
The point of what I'm
saying is entire childhood in the iconic ghetto, as they say.
Right, yeah. Now, I was fortunate that I stayed out of trouble, and the way that I think now has been the way that I thought even since I was a little kid, believe it or not. So I was fortunate to stay out of trouble. Not that that means anything. A lot of that is luck, you know what I'm saying? Right. But anyway, to get back on subject, the point is a lot of us don't have the education that we might want to act like we have. And that's part of the reason why you're saying that you're seeing these things. These misinformed people and these people that are presenting themselves to be something that they're not. I mean, the reality is we don't want to face accountability. We don't want to take accountability. We don't want to read. We don't want to learn the statistics. Like I said, most of us are not educated, even beyond formal education. A lot of us are not even informally educated. We're not even reading these books. Everything is coming from the internet, which, when we could go down a whole rabbit hole to talk about all this media and social media and the way that it's kind of dumbing people down and people are not reading and so on and so forth. But that's another topic. But the point is, most of us are not even educated enough to have a serious discussion about anything. So that's the first step. Like, we would have to be way more educated than where we are. We would have to be in a better position. And then to answer the rest of your question, yeah, no, I mean, honestly, I think that even you know the answer to that question, respectfully. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but even you know the answer to that question. I mean, we are not in this position. If we were in this position, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now, because we would all know that, and we wouldn't have these people doing this FBA and all these different arguments. I mean, it's like cutting off your hand to spite your face or whatever, and why are we even doing some of these things? It's clear to anybody with, any sort of logic that it doesn't make any sense, some of the things that we do. And that's why I said, like, we need to look at things from a perspective of, does this make any type of sense as far as progressing, Black people forward? Or does it only make sense to put money in my pockets or to get myself an audience or whatever the case may be, right? If we look at things from that perspective for real, then we will be able to easily see who is legitimate, who's not, and what it is that we need to be doing, right? Does this policy actually benefit me and other people, or does it only benefit myself? And that's why I kind of gave some of my background. Again, not to brag or do anything. I'm not anybody special. There's certainly people that are way more educated and successful than me. The point of me saying that is just that, too often we're looking at things from an individual standpoint. Individualism is I would say, too prevalent in our community, and it dominates our thinking. And we even have people on these panels and online talking all this unity crap, but they're really individualists. You know what I'm saying? They're looking at everything from, how can they gain more followers? How can they make more money? How can they grift more from the Black community? Rather than,
I think that's a good point, because I know that there was a brother on my channel once. Well, no, it was a sister, and she's like, I don't want to promote, what I got going on. I said, sister, this is the Black Empowerment Initiative, not a Lumumba Empowerment Initiative. So I have no problem with someone coming on my platform, my channel, and promoting who they are, their information, what they're doing, the books they've written, etc. But I think I'm just saying that's a good point that you made.
Yeah, but just to wrap it up, yeah. So no, I don't think that I think we are still in a loop. To answer your questions as directly as possible, I think we are still in a loop. We're clearly still in a loop. We wouldn't be having this conversation if we didn't all know that we're still in a loop. And if you ask almost any Black person that has any little bit of education and understanding of what's going on in the world, they will also tell you that we're still in a loop, if they're being honest. You know what I'm saying? Which a lot of times we're not being honest with ourselves. But if we are being honest with ourselves and we are being accountable about our situation, we would know that. Now, furthermore, I'm going to throw out some other statistics, okay, that we don't talk about enough, just to support my argument. But here's the thing. I was just re-looking at this the other day. The census has us at about 13-point-something% of the population as far as people that identify and filled out the census as being Black, okay? Now, obviously, you can lie and whatever, or you cannot fill out the census. But as far as the data that we have, that's what it says, okay? So we are actually still a minority in terms of numbers. Now, why does that matter? Numbers factors into, power, right? Okay. Hopefully, I don't need to explain that too much. That should be pretty simple for everybody.
Yeah, I get it. The majority rules. It's very simple.
Right. Exactly. And then I told you about the education standpoint. So we don't necessarily have the knowledge level that we need. We don't have the numbers. I can go into the economic statistics too. Now there's been a lot of articles written from reputable sources, some that I can remember in the New York Times, Forbes, etc. About the wealth position of Black Americans. Now, I work in this area. This is something I have knowledge on. And, we're not in a position economically, okay? Our wealth is declining, and we're focused on all the wrong things. Our financial literacy is in a very, very bad position. Now, are we making progress in any of these areas? Don't get me wrong. Yes, I think we're making some progress, but with the decline in the numbers, the issues that we're having with relationships, and again, like I said, the system is against us. So if we're gonna keep trying to fight a system from an already also disadvantaged point, it's almost impossible and I'm not trying to like discourage people, but it's almost impossible to keep fighting it the way that you're, fighting it. Like you're gonna have to change something.
Right.
If you think you can change the strategies and stay in America and do it, okay. But even if you do that, you're still gonna have to change the strategy. You can't just keep doing the same thing over and over and hope that as basically what not to put words in your mouth, but like smartphones and things like that. That's not gonna be enough. You know what I'm saying? Because everybody's just not gonna be able to do that, and you can tell that by just looking. Just go out to Walmart right now, and you're gonna see some ratchetness. So it's like, I mean, but yeah, I think I answered your question.
Absolutely.
I, Brother Lumumbi, you wanted to go?
No, you got it.
No, I think that in your analysis just now, I can't go against some of the things that you were saying, but I would say this. The Jews in America are also a minority group, and so are the Asians. They are also a minority group. They are powerful in the United States, and you could correct me if I'm wrong on this, because of their connections to their respective countries.
Yes.
And I think that what makes us weak, and when I say us, even though I'm not in America, I can still consider myself a part of my brothers and sisters in America. I feel like sometimes we look at ourselves as a separate entity outside of the greater world. And I think that our power base may not necessarily be in America. I think our power base is on the continent. I think our power base is in the Caribbean. I think our power base is outside of America, but we could use that, parlay that, and then then bring that back as far as resources, things we need to trade, etc., 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 to become more powerful within the business of America. I think that that's something that's not really been tried with us in America. I think that our disconnectedness with the rest of the Black world is causing us to be weaker. And I think that our unwillingness to want to connect with the greater Black world, I feel like is problematic. I feel like, yes, all of us separately, we have our own problems in our respective places of where we are. But I think that connected, we would be much stronger, and we would create a stronger political and economic and even social front on the stage of America. But I think that our unwillingness to make these kinds of connections is continuously going to make us weak into the future until we choose, like you say, until we choose to take a different format, and until we choose to break free of that loop. That's my belief. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Okay. Love Ash states, I'm on Washington side. Tap in, be part of the conversation, and let us know why. Once again, you do not have to cam up to be part of the conversation, but we definitely want to hear why you're taking a Washington perspective rather than a more nuanced approach where we marry both sides and get the best of both worlds. So with that being said, Brother Bawana, I like what you stated, and I think that that's the major issue. Many individuals take the position that, we could become powerful like other racial ethnic minorities in America if we adopt the practices they're practicing, but they don't look at the fact that they also have a connection to what their mother country. As I stated before on a past broadcast, I said if you watch the movie Independence Day from 1996, all those spaceships were linked to the mothership, right? And so we had to be linked to the mothership as well.
Yes. One last thing I wanted to say: the whole idea of our unwillingness to. Well, I don't know if our community, as the brother was saying, is even if I don't know if they are willing to have this interest in a knowledge itself. I think that the greater interest is like the brother was suggesting, getting money, working within the capitalist system and trying to financially, get themselves out of the situation that they're in. I don't necessarily know if that would be enough because there are many wealthy Black people in America who still suffer the fact that they Black in America. So I don't know if that will work. My conclusion is more of collectivism, international collectivism. I think that is a more workable solution, but that's just me. As far as access is concerned, I think that one of the greatest strengths is the fact that we have the access to technology in the so-called Western world. You know, Dr. Lumumba suggested a book, Savior or Sellouts. Don't you know I downloaded that in maybe 2 seconds to him saying that off a PDF? Many people, many people don't have that kind of access. And for me, that with that kind of access, you are able to do things more so than most people in the world. Yeah, I mean, and I think that, like I say, I think that we have smartphones, but it's being used incorrectly. That's why we are spreading our ignorance all over the world, let alone within our own community.
For example, and just to mention that I had a conversation with my daughter earlier today, she knows who the rapper Gorilla is. So we're talking about the ignorance being omnipresent, but this type of information not being omnipresent, right? My daughter's 12 years old. I was going to have her be part of the broadcast. Now she's up in the room sleep, right? I should wake her up, like, come on down here, right? But she's going to be looking crazy in the face, right? But the fact that she knows who the rapper Gorilla is, she knows the song FNF, Fuck Nigga Free, right? But she didn't. But I had to have a conversation with her about the debate between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B Du Bois.
Oh, and she is in a privileged position because most Black fathers won't be PhD. Well, most Black fathers won't be professional academic scholars, and most Black fathers, she may not have. Well, most Black little girls won't have the information or the access that she does, and that's a fortunate thing. That's a beautiful thing. But like I said before, I think that as a community, we need to reignite this whole reading culture. I think that we come from a reading culture. One of the best things that happened after slavery is you saw the prominence of the Black universities and colleges and training grounds and things like that. Many of those people, were autodidactics. You know, many of them taught themselves a lot of the things they knew, and they passed on that information. And for me, that was a level of greatness that really needs to be investigated a little bit more, because we really think, and I'm not disrespecting universities, but we think that this is the only place where we could get educated and informed. And I really think that we are mistaken with that belief, because the system is going to tell you what the system thinks and how to think. But the uncontrollable mind is able to use the system and use information for himself. He's able to go out there, find information for himself, and the system don't really know how to have a range on him because they don't really know what he's read. It's like he's an unharnessed wild horse. I don't want to compare us to horses, but he's unharnessed. It's like you can't really put a harness on his mind. He has an open mind. You can't really harness it. I don't know. Maybe I'm rambling right now. I'll stop.
It's okay. And I kind of get the basis of what you're speaking to, right? And this is something that, and I appreciate you making the statement that you made regarding my daughter being in a privileged position. I don't think she sees it as such right now, but maybe she will when she's older, right? But my thoughts are, we're in a situation in which, and I've always tried to promote, at least in my home, that a culture of intelligentsia, a culture of African-centered intelligentsia. Unfortunately, there are outside influences, right? And so my personal opinion is that I don't think this will be something that we will be able to galvanize on a large scale. I think we will have pockets of individuals or groups in our communities, study groups, so on and so forth, book clubs. But on a macro level, this reminds me of back in the 1920s when A. Philip Randolph was doing his organizing for Black socialism, trying to create Black unions. Many people may be unaware that back 100 years ago, it was not in vogue to be engaging in union organizing, particularly if you were a Black person. It was actually very dangerous, extremely dangerous. You were actually, by many accounts, taking your life in your own hands if you were to engage in union organizing. And if you haven't watched the movie 10,000 Negroes Named George, 10,000 Black Men Named George, look that movie up. It was a great movie about, of course, A. Philip Randolph and the struggle to create the association of the Associated Sleeping Car Porters and Maids, right? The first Black union. But I say all that to say that he was trying to sell, of course, his newspaper, The Messenger, what he argued was the greatest Negro monthly periodical in the world. And one of the young boys, who was the newspaper boy, said, I didn't make any sales today. People are having too much fun to be worried about political organizing. And I think we're in the same position today. People are having too much fun. People are living for the gram. There's too much. I was even having a conversation with my daughter today about what female rappers are promoting stripper culture. And she was able to tell me about, Gorilla and Lado and Cardi B, so on and so forth. So this has now permeated the minds of Black people. And so the focus is on stripper culture, right? And I'm not saying this, I'm not trying to be misogynistic and just speak ill of Black women or Black female rappers, but we're seeing the permeation and the promotion of negative aspects of life, rather than, of course, positive ones that promote education, intelligentsia, and, of course, Black institution building.
Would you say that the Harlem Renaissance was like a mass intellectual kind of like Black movement back in the day? And if it was, how
intellectual and cultural in nature, and what many people, so intellectual and cultural in nature. What many people don't know was that the Dayton, Ohio native, we're talking about Paul Laurence Dunbar. Shout out to Dayton, Ohio. He's from Dayton, Ohio, my hometown. Was one of the primary influencers, of course, of the Harlem Renaissance. Many people may be unaware that Paul Laurence Dunbar was a Black nationalist. His newspaper, which was the first Black newspaper in Dayton, Ohio, the Dayton Tatler, excoriated the Black community for celebrating the 4th of July. Right. And so his literature was a major contributor and influencer of course, the Harlem Renaissance.
So if the brothers and sisters back in the day had that effect to be able to influence so many people, not only within New York City, but the rest of America, do you think that we have the ability to get there again? Consider go ahead.
So I'm gonna say this, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think one of the things we have to look at, back then there were less distractions. Number one, there wasn't television. There was no TV. Right? So when you talk about entertainment, people oftentimes had to engage themselves intellectually in order to be entertained. For example, before television, oftentimes, particularly in the 19th century, in order to be entertained, people would go and listen to people lecture. They would go to public debates. That was the form of entertainment. Not the case now.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Nowadays, to get the attention of a wide audience is almost as subtle as you hitting them in the head with a sledgehammer. I mean, it's almost that serious to get someone to pay attention to you. So I could understand that. And that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. And so nowadays, I think oftentimes what we try to do, particularly with the initiatives and organizations that I've been blessed to be part of, we've tried to focus on edutainment, right? We've tried to entertain while also educating, right? But that, of course, oftentimes can be extremely difficult because of what people view as entertainment nowadays can oftentimes be vulgar, hypersexualized, and oftentimes racially disempowering. And so to be able to, find that nuance there, oftentimes, in my opinion, based on my personal experience, anecdotal experience, is extremely difficult.
I don't know. Maybe our next teacher is gonna have to be strippers with half clad, just teaching on Black history and things of that nature to get the attention and the minds of our people, man. It's so unfortunate, man. But like I say, Doc, Brother Lumumba, I can't stay long. I gotta get back to some work. It's been very fun. The other brothers and sisters, you all tap in and join the discussion. Brother Lumumba is harmless. He won't bite. And he'll go easy on y'all guys. So thank you, Brother Lumumba.
Hey, I appreciate it. No doubt. Appreciate you tapping in. Booker T Jr. Once again, there was a sister that made a claim, and she stated that she was a fan of Booker T. Washington's approach and perspective. I would love for her to tap in. Please tap in, sister. At least share your comments in the chat. But I would prefer for you, of course, to tap in and, of course, discuss why you're more so Booker T. Washington as opposed to W.E.B Du Bois, and of course why you are opposed to what I would presume to be opposed to a marrying of their perspectives. Brother Trevor Prime states, entertainment for my grandmother consists of spending a morning in court listening to cases. Absolutely. Oftentimes, I've always stated that historically entertainment was rooted in oftentimes intellectually stimulating activities. Brother Trevor Prime, appreciate you tapping in, commenting. Come on, be part of the conversation, brother. Once again, you do not have to cam up to be part of the conversation, but tap in. I'm gonna put the link in the chat, and hopefully, you could tap in and be part of the conversation. But Booker T, the floor is yours.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, very interesting, points being made and great conversation and whatnot. One thing I want to say real quick before we move forward, when I was saying earlier that we should focus on things that are going to progress us forward in a positive direction, I would say, I just want to make a quick point on this, like, for somebody like yourself, if you are, say, a professor and you have relevant knowledge and actual expertise and things to offer, and you feel comfortable speaking out on something that you see is being said or done that's wrong, I say go for that, for people like you. Now, for people like me, I'm not presenting myself to be, there's some things that I've read, and I'll tell you if I read it or if I haven't, and that I have knowledge on, but I'm not pretending to be an expert or a scholar on everything, so for people like me.
Let me say this. In my personal opinion, having credentials, being a scholar, doesn't mean anything to people. And the reason, I give an example. You want to know why? Because the individuals that get the most, clout aren't scholars. And people will listen to them and live and die by their words.
Well, yeah, but what I will say, respectfully, and I agree with that, and that's a major problem, but we still need people like you to, who are knowledgeable to counter that and to say, put the truth out there, put the facts out there, link us to the books, educate us. Now, what I will say is you're right. Mostly the masses have been dumbed down to the point where they're not going to all follow that, at least quickly. It'll take time. And what the other guy was saying, Bawana, he may be a person who's going to immediately download the links to the books and read them. But that's not going to be the average person, because the average person doesn't read anything. But no, I'm not even trying to be.
No, I know. You said the average person. I know.
And do you agree with me? Don't you agree?
No,
okay.
I do agree with you. Agree with you. And the thing about it with me was, I was a bit different growing up. So I was a good athlete, not a great athlete. So of course, as a child, I would participate in sports and I would do very well and win. But I was never like a dumb jock. Like, so I would play football, win a trophy, come home and read the encyclopedia. Now, I remember my sister would tease me all the time. And if she's watching this, today is my sister's birthday. I'm not going to state the age, but I just state that she's older than me, right? So happy birthday to big sis. But she would always tease me, like, who just reads the encyclopedia? Like, but for me, it was always interesting, right? So I think that's an issue. Sister Amar says, they couldn't stand Dr. Umar and one of his credentials. So I think that's twofold, right? So I think one of the reasons people took umbrage with Dr. Umar Johnson was because he had a traditional education, but he didn't pair it traditional, but he prepared it non-traditional views and values. So typically in American education, particularly higher education, there's a belief, or at least there is a goal of the more education you get, the more you begin to align yourselves with the values that are America, right? And so I, as someone who's working towards a terminal degree, I've experienced that myself, right? The second issue, in my opinion, is the fact that many people started to take umbrage with Dr. Umar Johnson based on his behavior. Oftentimes, the behavior that he was exhibiting became extremely questionable, problematic, unbecoming. And as a result, people began to stray away from him because he began to behave in a manner that was extremely eccentric in nature. And I'm an eccentric person, but it was going to the point the way it was like, man, I don't know if this guy is on that narcotic or not. So, and then of course, last but not least was the issue with the school, right? He's raised nearly $1 million. It's been about 10 years since he started doing the fundraising, and yet and still there is no school. And then last I heard, he was on someone's platform. He was asked about the school and actually snapped on the post and actually was a sister, and he said, "Don't ask me about no, you know what money." So I think there are a number of issues that have led many people to take umbrage with Dr. Umar Johnson as someone who was a speaker for, of course, Black empowerment, particularly from a Pan-African perspective.
Good points. One thing I also want to say real quick is that I know a lot of the things that I've said here, although I believe them to be true. I'm a realist, right? So I don't have a hard time, and I've overcome a lot of hardships, and I came in the world. One of the first things that a relative of mine told me was that life is not fair. Now I know a lot of people might hear that and might say, "Oh, well, a lot of people say that," but it's really true in my case. Okay, so I heard that when I was a young kid. The first time I heard it, I remember it. I always remember. I was like, "Why would you say that to me?" I'm like a little kid, but now I see that it really is true. And, in my particular case, I don't have any, ill will harbor to hearing that because it's the reality. Okay. So I don't have a hard time dealing with reality and being accountable. If I do anything, if I slip up, me personally, even to this day, nobody's going to pick me up. I'm the one that's carrying the other people. So I don't have a problem dealing with it. But a lot of Black people, even some of our men, they cannot do this, I guess, which is a problem. But I don't have a problem dealing with reality, but I understand how it can be depressing or disconcerting to some other people. So if that happened from anything that I said, that's not really my intention. My only point is just to present the reality and the facts so that we can then move forward, because until we can confront that, we're not going to be able to do that. So that's what I would say. But to give some more positive things, so I'm not just giving the negatives, like, there are things that we can do. Like, one reason I want to say I'm on this panel is because, I've been watching you, Mr. Lumumba, like, on this panel and other panels. I watch people, and this is the only panel that I've ever gone on YouTube, period. Even like non-political or, race-related stuff, because I want to know, is this person legitimate, or at least do I think that they're likely legitimate? You get what I'm saying? I don't want to be coming up here talking, because I'm not playing around. Like, I actually mean the things that I say. So I don't want to come up here and you're not being you're not being genuine, or I think you're kind of selling something that you're not really standing on, which at the end of the day, I have no idea. Like I said, anybody can be a fraud, but I feel obviously comfortable enough to come on here. So I say that to say that there are people that will recognize that you are, somebody to listen to and to, look up to or get information from, or whatever. So this platform and this panel does have a purpose. And anyone who's really doing this, there's even people that I don't agree with, and I think they're slightly disingenuous, but even still, they still sometimes are putting out some good information. It may only be 30%.
I tell people that all the time. A broken clock is right twice a day. Right. And so for me, my whole thing is it's called being objective. I try to be objective in everything that I do. Because a broken clock could be right twice a day. I teach my students that when they debate in class, you attack the argument and not the person. Attack the argument and not the person. Attack the argument and not the person. In order to do that, you have to focus on facts, not feelings. So that's my perspective. I've really sought to take everything that I've learned as an educator and with the principles I practice as an educator and put it into this platform to disseminate information that I hope, of course, will help give people a competitive advantage. I'm sorry, Black people a competitive advantage.
Yeah, I appreciate that. No, but I definitely think so it's a great thing. And that's another reason why I come on here too, because I see, obviously, like you said, you're saying these things and you're not getting as much engagement. We know that. We know the saying of, like, whatever the saying is, sex sells, like whatever the thing is, that, something is more whatever you want to say, lower in value or
Mhm.
less intellectual, it might sell more or engage a larger audience. Okay, we know that. And then, yes, I would say it's gotten worse in the present time. And that might be another good topic for you to possibly, touch on if you wanted to. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. But at the same time, there are people who are going to appreciate it. And I think if you keep at it enough, and if we can get people to support, like I come on here sometimes, I'm making time. I got other things I could be doing today, right
I
now.
appreciate
But
it.
yeah, but I decided to because this was an interesting topic that I felt like I've read a little bit on myself, and I think it's a very interesting, and I think it's relevant to this time. And people may not understand it if they haven't read it, but what I would say is that I would encourage people to definitely read up, especially like I said, in my opinion, on Booker T, because I really think he has some relevant things to say that are still relevant today. It's not great that they're relevant, but they are still relevant in my opinion. So, people can read up on these things, but yeah, no, I mean, I would say try not to get discouraged. Even for people that's on the panel that are not
Right.
professors like me, don't get discouraged. There are good people out there.
Yeah.
And I just want to touch on Dr. Umar real quick. I'm not going to say anything crazy, so don't worry.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah, but this is what I would say about that. I mean, everything that you said is a good summarization. This is what I would say for people. I monitor him just like I monitor anybody else. Like, yeah, there are some things that are questionable with him, I would say. But even I would say he serves a purpose, right? Like he's getting you to at least think about things. And I know some people might say, oh, well, no, we're going to throw out the baby with the bathwater. If anybody is even questionable, we just going to get rid of them. I mean, look, like we're not in a position to really do that. Like he's a scholar that is, or at least he claims to be a scholar that is presenting himself as being, passionate about certain issues. He has, I would say, a lot of the things he's done with his discussion of the way that some of our, Black children have been educated or miseducated, things like that. He promotes Pan-Africanism. He promotes some good things. I mean, the school in particular is questionable. You could question other things, but look, I mean, none of us are perfect at the end of the day. I'm not perfect. Sure, Lumumba has talked about his, whatever he's been through. Nobody's perfect. People like to do this all the time, even with the Martin Luther King thing. I'm not even a big Martin Luther King thing. I'm agnostic, but and I prefer Malcolm X to him.
We should do. I'm gonna do a show on where does Black agnostics and Black atheists stand in the Black liberation struggle, something like that.
I'll be happy to come on and talk about
Absolutely.
that.
Because I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist, so.
Right, yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, no, but yeah, so just to wrap it up, like yeah, no, I mean we gotta if they're, I would say if they're doing anything that is positive, that's gonna potentially have a good effect on the community, even if you don't need it, like even if you don't need the information they're presenting, somebody else may be able to benefit, right? Like here's a big thing: all of us cannot. We have different people in different types of people. We have people from the hood that are downtrodden that some of them are never gonna elevate. They're not gonna start reading these books. They're not gonna start doing. I know these types of people. Like I said, I know different types of people. I know everybody from your suit and tie to your high level military Black person to your dude in the hood that's never left the hood. Okay, and I'm not saying any of that to brag or whatever. Nothing. I'm just telling you the truth. I know these people, and look. Like some people are going to stay where they're going to stay. You know what I'm saying? So if you want to try to be the one to try to reach them from 10,000 feet, or you want to take that W.E.B approach, that's up to you. But you should understand that you will not reach, certain people with that. And
right.
I don't understand how you're going to be able to make any progress if you're only reaching a small percentage of the overall population. So I think that if anybody's offering anything of value, as long as they're not completely. Now, Umar, everything he was doing was just completely fraudulent. I understand some people might see it that way, but I don't know if I quite see it that way. I mean, I'm not donating to the school.
Right.
He does have a building. Whether it's going to go forward or not, I don't know. I mean, that's a lot of that stuff. Like I said, some of that stuff gets into the territory of things that we need to stop focusing on that mess. Like everything is okay. If he doesn't do the school, then we can't support Pan-Africanism. Like what? I mean, it's two different things. Like leave it alone. If he's gonna do the school, cool. If you want to donate to the school, cool. If you don't donate to the school, but you can still be doing something that's progressive. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. And I'll shut up. But yeah.
So I'm gonna close with this. When the sister was talking about, but people were questioning Dr. Umar Johnson's credentials. So this is what I would say, and I'm gonna give an actual example. So I try to, whenever I make a audacious or provocative claim, give a tangible example to undergird the position I'm taking. So I think one of the issues is because in the so-called conscious community or the woke community, we tend to find a situation in which many individuals would claim that they're doctors. Right, claim that they're a professor, that they have been a professor before. That's never the case. So I'm gonna give you an example. A great example would be Dr. C.B. Right, I think everyone is familiar with Dr. C.B. This man is a man who claimed that he was a doctor, right? However, he had never gone to medical school. He had never even gone to college. Had never even completed a semester of college, even at a community college. But he was claiming to be a doctor. So we know, unfortunately, in our community, there are individuals who have gone out and made claims that they are something that they actually are not, in order to gain people's trust and favor, and in order to have what influence. So this is extremely problematic, and that's why I'm always for people saying, "Hey, I need to see the credentials. Where did you get your degree from?" So on and so forth, right? And we also know that Dr. C.B. People were going to his clinic or whatever he had set up. I think it was in Brooklyn, and of course there was an investigation done because you can't practice medicine without having a medical license, and they found that he wasn't actually practicing medicine. So to practice medicine, that means you have to diagnose an illness and actually prescribe what a actual solution to the illness, right? So it doesn't have to necessarily be an actual prescription of something, but you could prescribe. That person does physical therapy, that person does XYZ. What Dr. Sebi was doing, I noticed that I read the court documents, was people were coming in complaining of illnesses, and he was just recommending to them that they change their diet. But the issue was that he was claiming and promoting himself as a medical doctor, even though he hadn't even completed one semester, 1/4 of coursework at any level of secondary education. So this is why it is extremely important that when a person claims that they're X, we make sure that they're actually X. We don't just take their word for it, because he was making claims that he healed people of AIDS, and I tell people all the time, prove it. So we're going to close out. I'm going to give the last word to Brother Booker T on that, on what I just stated, and then we're going to close out for today.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. And it's important to note between what you said and what some things like Amor Jones said in the comments and some other people. There's a difference. Okay, so Dr. Sebi, as you said from that, now I'm familiar with the whole Dr. Sebi thing, but I haven't read the actual court transcripts or anything like that. So let's just say though, if he's saying that, as you said, that basically he's trying to prescribe things or essentially act as a MD.
No, he never prescribed. He never diagnosed.
Oh, okay.
He would simply do what? Make recommendations that people change their diet in order to have a healthier lifestyle. But the issue is he was calling himself Dr. Sebi, and he had never went to college.
Okay, yeah, got you. Okay.
That's the issue.
Yeah. No doubt. But here's a distinction I want to say, and you didn't say this, but my point for other people is just, okay, in that case, he's presenting himself as a doctor, he's giving advice, and people may be attributing his advice to his expertise, which is fraudulent, as you're saying, right? Yeah, so that is a problem. Now, what I would say, and I'm not trying to defend like Dr. Umar or anybody else, right? As I said, I haven't donated to the school. I'm not going to be out in the street because, marching for Dr. Umar, because right now I don't feel like, it's that relevant to me personally. But my point is just that there's a difference between what a person is saying that's damaging to you or your community that you need to worry about today versus, just like fighting a fight that isn't that serious. Now, if Dr. Sebi was doing that, then that could be damaging to your health and your community. That could, Black people could be dying following his
And I would
advice.
say that, and I would say that it is, because if this man is promoting himself as a doctor, you're going to go see him rather than going to an actual doctor.
Exactly.
So that is damaging. That is, problematic. So then people say, well, why you got to go get the white man's credentials? This isn't the white man's credentials. The basis of medicine started with Hemotep and ancient Kemet. So this ain't no white people shit, right? And the reason why this is important, because if you go to an actual doctor and they misdiagnose you and misprescribe you treatment, you can sue for medical malpractice. If someone who isn't a doctor misdiagnoses you and misprescribes treatment, you can't do anything. You have no recourse. It's the same as if your car breaks down, you take it to Midas, you take it to a transition shop, and they fix it, or they're supposed to fix it, but they end up doing more damage. You can sue and make them fix it for free and get paid damages. But if you go to a guy who's on the street corner, absolutely, it's called liability. But if you go to a guy who's a garage mechanic, guess what? You're screwed. You're SOL.
Right, yeah. And that is a good general rule and reason why any sort of, I'm against some of the anti-intellectualist movement that we have, people wanting to essentially say that you can learn everything from the internet or from internet gurus versus actual formal education, which is not the case. And I agree, that can definitely be damaging. But I think we do need to make a distinction between, say, him and even if you don't want to say use Dr. Umar, because maybe I'm missing something, maybe I'm forgetting something, but as far as I know, like for the most part, unless you want to say that he's not a psychologist, all that stuff, you want to dispute that stuff, which I don't know, so I can't defend him either way. But, basically my general point here is not to use anybody as an example. Just like if it's not damaging to us really as a whole, or we can't prove that the person is a fraud completely, then let's just not really focus on them, basically. Like, let's stop making them as much of the focus when we should be really focusing on other things. You know what I'm saying?
I know there's been some groups who've gone out their way to try to research him and all this stuff. I'm like, man, that's too much energy. I got better shit to do. I'm just gonna be real. I got better shit to do. I got a dissertation to write. I got a child to raise. I got dinner I got to make. I got a book club I want to. I ain't got time for that. Now, if he makes a claim that's patently false, I might come on my channel and hey, this is in response to what brother said. I'm attacking the argument he made. This is why I disagree. Boom, I'm out the door with more, right? But I mean, for people that can say we're doing research and we created an organization to go out, I don't have time for all of that. It reminds me of back in the early 20s or mid 20s, where there was a Garvey Must Go coalition that was created, and of course, A. Philip Randolph was part of it. But and there were some reasons why they took an issue with the Garvey movement. But listen, man, you're doing too much, B. Like, have that same energy for these white nationalists out here.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely agree.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the bottom line, look, mind over matter, basically. Like, if we got too many problems to be, I got too many personal problems, to be honest with you, to be dealing with, worrying about what somebody's doing that doesn't affect me. Now, like I said, if the misinformation gets too bad, or you just feel like you got to speak out, I can see that. But, I have more of a problem with those people that are intentionally causing division, or I can't say clearly, but they appear to possibly be paid actors, or at least they have some sort of incentive to be causing division that's not, what's the word I'm looking for? Not progressive, but I can't think of the word, but it's not productive. That's what I'm looking. It's not productive to our, overall mission, right? So those types of people, okay, yeah, go against them as much as you might need to kind of quiet them down. But for the most part, let's just, I'll try to wrap it up here by just saying, let's just focus more so on supporting people like Professor Lumumba, anybody else who is presenting you some sort of facts or helpful information, even if it's not in this sort of program, whether it's financial, whether it's just spiritual, whatever it is. Like, focus more on those types of things that you can use versus just arguing back and forth on the internet. Because that's another thing we got right now going on, is too much back and forth about absolutely nothing that's taking
Yes.
us nowhere. And we spending hours just doing it. And it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So listen, brother, Booker T. Washington Jr. for today, right? Appreciate you tapping in. You know, you're always welcome. Want to end very quickly by encouraging people to go to my website, LumumbaSpeaks.com, and please review my publications. I have quite a few publications, including my master's thesis, Is Pan-Africanism Dead? I think is a rather provocative take on the current state of Pan-Africanism. Would love for everyone to review that, as well as anti-Blackness in American higher education. And then, of course, I'll talk about brave talk is not enough, presidential order needed to provide constitutional rights. I discussed this, of course, in the aftermath of the George Floyd killing. And then, of course, I even discussed the conveyor belt system of American politics, in which I argue that there's a conveyor belt system at play concerning the Black voter and the American political system's complex web of local, state, and national organizations, think tanks, lobbyists, congressional districts, and politicians. This concept of the conveyor belt comes, of course, from retired New York Times columnist William C. Rhoden, who is famous for writing the book $40 Million Slaves, The Rise, Fall, and Redemption of the Black Athlete, where he argues that there's a conveyor belt system in the American sports industry in which the raw material, Black athletic talent, is siphoned from Black neighborhoods and shipped off to make money for white colleges, corporations, and sports teams. Last but not least, my latest publications, there are two, are Why I Am Critical of Critical Theory, in which I examine critical theory and its unwillingness to center the work of scholars and theorists outside the Western European sphere of influence, particularly the work of late 19th, early 20th century Black scholars, Dr. Anna Julia Cooper, Dr. W.E.B Du Bois, and of course, Dr. One Carter G. Woodson. And last but not least, Travis Hunter in the Move Toward Black Power, in which I incisively examine a top football prospect's audacious flip from a major NCAA football program to an HBCU, and its historical antecedents and how it may be a catalyst for future Black empowerment. Last but not least, I would love for everyone, if you want me to come, appreciate it. Sister Jones says the Critical Theory Pub was a good read. I appreciate that. If you are interested in having me come to a youth center, school, or even any group that is interested in Black empowerment, I would love you could go on to the speaking tab, and I'll be willing to come out and give a presentation. I do presentations on a number of different issues in which I believe we could find a way to actually solve many of the issues, of course, in the Black community. So with that being said, that is all for now. Until next time, make sure you always bet on Black. Peace.